Beneath Jerusalem's sky in 990 BC, a silver moon cast a chilling glow over the stone streets, its light stretching long, ominous shadows that seemed to whisper of an impending tragedy. Within the palace, as the wind howled through the stone windows, a child was born on the fragile edge between sin and redemption, bearing a destiny that could either shape the world or shatter it. Solomon, son of King David and Bathsheba, entered the world with a name meaning peaceful and friend of God. Yet his birth was cloaked in a horrifying secret, the adulterous affair between David and Bathsheba, while she was still married to Uriah, a valiant soldier in David's army. To hide his sin, David, with the cold heart of a king swayed by temptation, sent Uriah to the battlefield, ordering the troops to abandon him in the midst of battle, leading to Uriah's agonizing death under a barrage of enemy arrows. Their first child died as divine judgment, but Solomon was born after David's repentance, symbolizing forgiveness and peace between heaven and earth. But as Solomon's first cry tore through the silent night, a venomous whisper arose from the ancient darkness, the same shadow that had sown since Eden through Eve and Cain. Now gazing at Solomon with crimson eyes burning like blood, "You are the light of peace, Solomon, but I will turn you into a flame of destruction. Will you escape your parents' curse, or will you be the spark that ignites this kingdom's downfall?" Bathsheba held Solomon close, silent tears streaming down her cheeks, each drop a quiet plea for her child's safety. Her heart still ached from the memory of their first child, taken by God, a merciless punishment for her and David's sin, a loss that had left her weeping for days, her cries echoing through the palace halls. Solomon, with eyes as pure as moonlight, was a new hope, a promise of forgiveness, but Bathsheba felt a nameless chill seeping through the air, as if unseen eyes not of this world were watching her child. David, the king who once felled Goliath as a brave shepherd with a single stone and unshakable faith, now stood by the palace window, his gaze heavy with sorrow as he looked over the darkened city below. He placed a hand on Bathsheba's shoulder, seeking solace in Solomon's presence, but a deep, unshakable unease made his heart tremble, as if he sensed an invisible threat drawing near. He didn't know the darkness, with a cold, cruel smile, was lurking in the palace's hidden corners, watching the child's every breath, every beat of his tiny heart. It had witnessed Eden's collapse, had seen Abel's blood stain the earth, had laughed as Babel crumbled in linguistic chaos. Now, it saw Solomon as the perfect pawn, a future king who could lead Israel to radiant glory, but also destroy it if led astray by sin and temptation. Solomon, the child of peace, was born to bear God's light, a symbol of forgiveness and hope, but was tonight's moonlight the glow of a new beginning, or a harbinger of a tragedy that would plunge Israel into eternal darkness. Beneath the flickering torchlight of Jerusalem's palace, young Solomon walked through cold stone corridors, each shadowy corner whispering secrets of a deadly destiny waiting to unfold, as if the palace were not just a home, but a chessboard of fate. Solomon grew up under the guidance of the prophet Nathan, who became his mentor while David managed the kingdom. Nathan, with eyes as deep as if peering through the currents of time, saw in Solomon a blazing flame, a great fate, shaping his mind with profound teachings and divine revelations. But behind Nathan's wise gaze lay a dark scheme, a plan carefully concealed. Though not the firstborn, he used the secret of David and Bathsheba's adultery to convince David to choose Solomon as heir. With words as sharp as a blade, chosen with the precision of a hunter setting a trap, Nathan persuaded David that Solomon was God's will, the destined king to lead Israel to glory. But as Nathan placed a hand on Solomon's shoulder, his gaze trembled a nameless fear, as if he sensed the ancient darkness, the same shadow that had sown since Eden through Eve and Cain, watching from the stone crevices. "You are chosen to lead Israel, Solomon, but I will turn your wisdom into a consuming fire. Will you escape the fate I've already woven, or will this kingdom crumble in the flames of your own pride?" Solomon, with innocent eyes alight with wonder, couldn't hear the venomous whisper echoing through the palace's darkness, a whisper like a deathly song sung by a patient predator. He was enthralled by Nathan's tales of his father David, who felled Goliath with a single stone, and unwavering faith, of Noah's flood that drowned the world in God's wrath, and of Babel's tower shattered by linguistic chaos as humans dared to challenge the heavens. Nathan didn't teach Solomon to wield a sword or lead armies, but to see through human hearts, to hear God's voice amidst the whispers of foes, to discern light from darkness in the soul. Each morning, Nathan led Solomon through the stone corridors, pointing to walls carved with the covenant, his voice resonating like an unyielding prophecy. You will be king, Solomon, but a king who rules with wisdom, not a sword. Solomon nodded, his heart ablaze with a thirst for knowledge, but he didn't see the flicker of fear in Nathan's eyes, a fear that the very wisdom he was instilling in Solomon might become the darkness's weapon, a razor-sharp blade the darkness would use to sever the covenant's thread. The darkness, lurking in the palace's hidden corners, laughed coldly as it watched Nathan unwittingly open the door to pride in Solomon's mind. Like a gardener unaware, he was planting the seeds of a poisonous tree. It had destroyed Eden, had stained the earth with Abel's blood, had laughed as Babel crumbled in chaos. Now, it saw Solomon as the perfect pawn, a future king with unparalleled wisdom, but also a tender heart, easily led astray by pride and temptation. Solomon, under Nathan's prophetic gaze, was being groomed to become the greatest king Israel had ever seen. But did Nathan realize that his own lessons were leading Solomon to the brink of ruin? And what would the darkness unleash when the young king's moment of pride drew near? Beneath a blood-red sunset staining the sky over Jerusalem, the palace of King David was shrouded in a deathly silence. A throne awaited its heir, but whispers of rebellion lurked in every shadow, poised to erupt like a savage flame that could consume the last remnants of a glorious reign. As David neared death, he named the 15-year-old Solomon as his successor. Solomon, though young, understood the threats from potential enemies waiting to seize the throne, eager to plunge a dagger into his back for the ultimate prize of power. He conducted a purge, eliminating Joab, David's general, and Adonijah, a rival for the throne. With a ruthlessness far beyond his years, Solomon sent a message as sharp as a blade. No one was safe from his iron justice, whether friend or foe. He also strengthened Israel's military and forged an alliance with Egypt by marrying Pharaoh's daughter, cementing ties between the nations. Solomon sat on his golden throne, his piercing gaze sweeping over the court like a hunting eagle. A chilling voice echoed from the ancient darkness, the same shadow that had sown since Eden, witnessing Babel's fall. You've claimed the throne with blood, Solomon, but I will stir the greed. Of your enemies will you hold this kingdom together, or will I turn it to ash beneath your feet? Solomon, his heart heavy as if a stone pressed against his chest, gazed over the kingdom from his throne, where songs once praised David, but now only whispers of rebellion hissed like serpents in the dark. Each decision he made, from executing Joab, David's once loyal right hand, to eliminating Adonijah, his ambitious brother whose eyes burned with jealousy, was a step to secure his rule. Yet, it ignited discontent among the court, their betrayal masked behind false smiles. The royal court, once a symbol of unity, had become a dangerous chessboard, filled with suspicious glances and fake smiles tracking the young king's every move, like wolves waiting for their prey to falter. Pharaoh's daughter, with her mystical beauty and eyes carrying the power of the Nile, entered Solomon's life as a symbol of peace, but also a threat, as whispers of Egypt's foreign gods began slithering into the palace like venomous serpents poised to strike, hissing temptations of forbidden power. The darkness, lurking within the cold stone walls, chuckled as Solomon wrestled between consolidating power and upholding his ancestors' faith, a man walking a tightrope between two chasms. It knew that every alliance, every ruthless choice, was a stepping stone to the chaos it would soon unleash, a web woven from greed and pride. Solomon, with his sharp wisdom and will as unyielding as steel, was determined to make Israel a mighty kingdom, a beacon of light in a world of shadows. But he couldn't see the darkness silently weaving a web of temptation, ready to ensnare him in the very thirst for power he sought to control, like a beast caught in a hunter's net. Israel, under Solomon's hand, stood on the brink of glory, but also on the edge of destruction. Would this throne be the light that leads the kingdom to greatness, or the fire that burns it all to ashes when the darkness fulfills its cruel plan? Under the starlit sky of Jerusalem, young King Solomon lay in his palace bed, his heart pounding as the burdens of the throne weighed heavily on his shoulders, each night a silent struggle against an invisible weight pressing on his chest. In a dream, God appeared and offered to grant Solomon any request. Solomon, with a humble heart, deeply aware of the responsibility of ruling a kingdom rife with intrigue and rebellion, sought neither boundless wealth to fill his coffers, nor infinite power to subdue his enemies. He asked for a discerning heart to govern justly. Pleased with his humility, God granted him unparalleled wisdom, promising no one would ever match him. Solomon awoke, feeling the divine gift coursing through his veins like a warm stream of light weaving through his body, wisdom to lead with justice and compassion, a gift that could alter the destiny of an entire kingdom. But as the first star of dawn glimmered through the palace window, casting a faint glow across his chambers, a cold voice echoed from the ancient darkness, the same shadow that had sown since Eden, that had witnessed Abel's blood stain the earth, now gazing at Solomon with crimson eyes burning. Like hellfire, your wisdom is a gift from God, Solomon, but I will turn it into a fire of pride. Will you keep your humble heart, or will this very wisdom lead you to the kingdom's ruin, destroying all you strive to build? Solomon awoke, sweat beading on his forehead, his eyes reflecting the twinkling stars outside, as if those stars were watching him with a gaze filled with concern. The dream was not just a promise from God, but a silent warning, a reminder that the greatest gift could also be a double-edged sword, sharp enough to cut through both light and darkness. He stepped onto the balcony, his bare feet touching the cold stone, gazing over the kingdom still wrapped in peaceful slumber, feeling the weight of responsibility pressing down on him like an invisible mountain. Israel, after the brutal years of war under David's reign, was a kingdom brimming with potential, but also fraught with unseen dangers, threats Solomon couldn't yet see, but the darkness had long foreseen, its crimson eyes gleaming with eternal malice. The darkness, lurking in the palace's hidden corners, laughed coldly as it watched the young king, knowing that Solomon's wisdom, though bestowed by God, was also a gateway to pride if left unchecked. It had seen the mightiest fall from Eve in Eden's garden, who bit into the forbidden fruit, from the builders of Babel, whose ambition to touch the heavens was punished by God with chaos. Now, it saw Solomon as a new pawn, a king with unmatched wisdom, but also a heart susceptible to the temptations of self-righteousness and the belief he could overcome any challenge. Solomon, with a fierce determination burning like an unquenchable flame, vowed to use this wisdom to protect Israel, to make the kingdom a beacon of light amid the shadows, a lighthouse of faith in a world rife with temptation. But he didn't know that every decision, every triumph, brought him closer to the trap. The darkness had set a trap that would test not just his wisdom, but his faith, like a storm on the horizon he couldn't yet see. Israel, under Solomon's guidance, stood on the cusp of greatness, but also on the edge of destruction. Would this gift of wisdom be the light that leads the kingdom to glory, or the fire that burns it all to ashes, when the darkness fulfills its cruel plan, shattering everything Solomon hopes to achieve? In the golden hall of Jerusalem's palace, sunlight streamed through towering stone columns, where King Solomon sat on his throne, his razor-sharp gaze scanning the crowd of subjects kneeling for justice, each carrying their own tale of anguish. One day, two women came before Solomon, both claiming to be the mother of the same child. The baby, cradled in one woman's arms, was the heart of the dispute, as both women wept, their conflicting stories trembling with pain and desperation. Solomon listened and ordered a sword to be brought, proposing to cut the child in two, giving half to each. The air in the hall grew stifling, the crowd holding their breath, whispers of horror rippling through as they witnessed the young king's shocking decree. The true mother, out of love, begged for the child's life to be spared, while the impostor agreed to the division. Solomon, with the divine wisdom bestowed by God, saw through their hearts and declared with a voice like thunder, "Give the child to the true mother, who would rather lose him than see him die." The judgment echoed through Israel, but from the shadows, a chilling voice emerged, the ancient darkness. "There's a shadow that had sown since Eden. Your justice astounds me, Solomon, but I will use this very wisdom to test you. Will you keep your humble heart, or will pride turn your righteousness into the fire that consumes your kingdom?" The hall erupted in applause, the people praising Solomon's wisdom, but he did not smile, his gaze lingering on the child, now safe in his mother's arms, his heart heavy, as if bearing an invisible burden. This judgment was not just a triumph of justice, but a reminder of love's power and a warning that his wisdom, though divine, could become a sharp blade, cutting into the very things he sought to protect. The crowd dispersed, spreading tales of the wise king, but Solomon felt a cold shadow watching, a frigid gust sweeping through the hall. The darkness, lurking within the stone walls, chuckled as Solomon wrestled with his gift, like an artist realizing his perfect creation could become a fire that burns the world. It knew each judgment, each triumph, was a chance to sow pride in the young king's mind, a poisonous seed that would grow into a deadly tree if unchecked. Solomon, with a heart full of resolve, vowed to use his wisdom to safeguard Israel, but he couldn't see the darkness weaving a web of temptation, ready to turn his divine gift into a blaze of destruction. Israel, under Solomon's guidance, was becoming a kingdom of justice and light, but would this wisdom be the torch that lights the way, or the fire that reduces it all to ashes when the darkness fulfills its sinister plan? Under Jerusalem's blazing sun, King Solomon stood at the pinnacle of power, his burning with ambition to transform Israel into an eternal beacon of faith and glory, a kingdom that would make the world bow in awe, its name echoing through generations as an immortal legend. Solomon decided to build Israel's first temple in Jerusalem, partnering with Hiram, king of Tyre, for materials and labor. The temple, constructed over 7 years, was a magnificent structure of cedar, gold, and stone. Solomon didn't stop there. He also built his palace over 13 years, an architectural masterpiece with grand halls and lush gardens. These projects transformed Jerusalem and solidified Israel's economic power. Both as the temple's golden light reflected on the palace, shining as brightly as the midday sun, a cold voice echoed from the ancient darkness, the shadow that had sown since Eden, that had witnessed Babel's collapse. "You build this temple to honor God, Solomon, but I will turn your ambition into fire of pride. Will this temple be a light of faith, or the blaze that consumes your kingdom under my wrath?" Each stone of the temple was laid with divine precision, the fragrant cedar blending with gleaming gold, making it an eternal symbol of the covenant between God and Israel, a place where people could feel God's presence through every beam of light streaming through the stained glass windows. Solomon, standing in the main hall, felt God's presence like a warm light enveloping him, but his heart also stirred with an insatiable ambition, a fire that refused to be quenched, burning fiercely within his chest as if it could consume the world to prove his greatness. His palace, with its verdant gardens fragrant with blooming flowers, its towering columns reaching for the sky, was not just a residence but a declaration of his supreme power, a monument that made other nations tremble in fear and reverence, as if the heavens themselves bowed before his splendor. Hiram's generosity had made Solomon's dream a reality, but each shipment of cedar from Tyre also carried whispers of foreign gods, whispers the darkness knew how to amplify, like a poisonous wind blowing through the lavish gardens, sowing seeds of temptation in the minds of the courtiers. Israel's people praised Solomon, hailing him as the greatest king in history, but he felt a chill from the golden walls, a chill not from the breeze, but from the darkness's presence, waiting to turn his ambition into a destructive blaze that would burn everything he had built. The darkness, with crimson eyes glowing in the shadows like hellfire, knew that each stone, each golden pillar, was a step closer to the pride it sought to sow in Solomon's mind, a poisonous seed that would grow into a deadly tree if unchecked. It had seen great kingdoms fall from Babylon with its arrogant towers, to Babel with its ambition to touch the heavens, and now it saw Solomon with a new plan, a king whose ambition could reach the sky, but who could also be consumed by that very fire, like an artist burned by his own masterpiece. Israel, under Solomon's hand, was becoming a symbol of light and power, a kingdom that awed the world. But would this temple be the torch that illuminates the kingdom, or the fire that reduces it all to ashes when the darkness completes its cruel scheme, destroying everything Solomon has poured his sweat and heart into building? Under the blazing sun of Jerusalem, the kingdom of Israel shone like a precious gem amidst the desert, its golden palace reflecting light across the sky, and Solomon's fame echoed to mystical lands where kings and queens dreamed of beholding the wisest ruler in the world, a man whose wisdom and splendor were said to surpass all imagination. The Queen of Sheba, intrigued by Solomon's fame, visited Jerusalem to test his wisdom, bringing gifts and posing difficult questions. She, with her mystical beauty like moonlight in the desert, her piercing eyes seeming to see through the soul, stepped into the palace, where Solomon answered with clarity beyond her expectations, leaving her in awe. She praised his wisdom and the splendor of his court, where gold, silver, and jewels abounded, his throne crafted from ivory and pure gold. But as the throne's golden light reflected in the queen's eyes, as if the sun itself bowed to Solomon's grandeur, radiant enough to eclipse the daylight, a cold voice echoed from the ancient darkness the shadow that had sown since Eden. You astonish even queens, Solomon, but this splendor will lead you to pride. Will your glory be the light that guides Israel, or the fire that consumes it all under my wrath? The Queen of Sheba, her voice like a song from a distant land, bowed before Solomon, but her gaze held not just admiration, but a curiosity about the young king's secrets, a chill she felt in her heart, secrets she sensed but couldn't grasp or unravel. Solomon's palace was a timeless masterpiece, its halls shimmering with gold and silver, its gardens fragrant with flowers from every corner of the earth, where the chirping of birds blended with the trickle of water from exquisite fountains, creating a symphony of luxury and power. But Solomon, seated on his intricately carved ivory throne, felt a chill in the queen's admiration, a chill not from the breeze, but from the darkness's presence, like a poisonous wind blowing through the lavish gardens, carrying the scent of temptation and destruction. The darkness knew that each word of praise, each gift from distant nations, was a stepping stone to the pride it sought to sow in Solomon's mind, a poisonous seed that would grow into a deadly tree if unchecked, a tree that could cast a shadow over the entire kingdom. If had seen great kingdoms fall from Babylon with its arrogant towers piercing the sky, to those who defied God at Babel, punished with linguistic chaos, and now it saw Solomon with a new plan, a king whose wisdom and splendor could touch the heavens, but who could also be consumed by that very fire of pride, like the brightest star ultimately swallowed by darkness. Israel's people hailed Solomon, calling him a symbol of light and power, but he sensed an unseen threat, as if each golden gleam in the palace whispered temptation, drawing him toward a deep abyss he couldn't yet see, an abyss where light and darkness intertwined. His kingdom stood at the peak of glory, a symbol of light and power that awed the world. But would this splendor be the torch that leads Israel to eternal glory, or the fire that burns it all to ashes when the darkness completes its cruel plan, destroying everything Solomon has built? In the lavish palace of Jerusalem, where golden walls reflected the sunlight like an endless flame, King Solomon sat in deep contemplation, his quill gliding across scrolls, inscribing timeless teachings as if God himself whispered through each stroke, each word bearing the power to illuminate the world. Solomon, inspired by God, authored Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and the Song of Songs, capturing divine wisdom. In Proverbs, he shared practical advice: the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. Ecclesiastes reflected on life's fleeting nature, concluding that fearing God is humanity's duty. The Song of Songs celebrated love and intimacy, a poetic hymn of the heart. These works became a lasting testament to Solomon's wisdom, guiding future generations. Solomon's quill paused, his gaze drifting to the distant horizon where the sunset bled red like blood. A cold voice echoed from the ancient darkness, the shadow that had sown since Eden. Your wisdom is a light, Solomon, but I will turn it into a fire of pride. Will these teachings save your kingdom, or lead you to its ruin, burning all you've built? Solomon, his heart heavy as if bearing an invisible mountain, felt the weight of the words he wrote, as if each sentence were a stone building his legacy, but also a stone that could lead him to a deep abyss, where light and darkness clashed in an unrelenting battle. He knew his wisdom, though God-given, was a double-edged sword, a gift that could illuminate the path for his people, but also consume everything if wielded unwisely, like an uncontrollable flame. The palace, once echoing with songs of his splendor, now seemed quieter, as if the golden walls themselves listened to the darkness's voice, a voice carrying the chill of destruction. The darkness, lurking in the palace's hidden corners, laughed coldly as it watched the wise king, knowing that each teaching, each word, was a chance to sow pride in Solomon's mind, a poisonous seed that would grow into a deadly tree, casting a shadow over the kingdom, burying its light in eternal darkness. If had seen the greatest souls fall from Eve in Eden's garden, who bit the forbidden fruit out of pride, from the builders of Babel, whose ambition to reach the heavens was punished by God with chaos, and now it saw Solomon as a perfect pawn, a king whose wisdom could lead Israel to radiant glory, but who could also be consumed by the very fire of pride it was sowing, like the brightest star ultimately swallowed by the night. Israel's people revered Solomon, seeing him as a beacon of wisdom, a king who could guide them through dark times, but he sensed an unseen threat, as if each stroke on the scroll whispered temptation, drawing him toward an abyss he couldn't yet see, an abyss where the light of wisdom could be twisted into a fire of destruction. His kingdom was becoming a symbol of light and power, a lighthouse in a world of shadows, but would this legacy of wisdom be the torch that lights the way for generations, or the fire that burns it all to ashes when the darkness completes its cruel plan, destroying everything Solomon hoped to leave for posterity? Beneath the blood-red sunset of Jerusalem, Solomon's palace, once a symbol of light and power, now stood cloaked in an ominous air, as if the golden walls themselves whispered of an impending tragedy, a storm of destruction silently gathering on the distant horizon. Despite his wisdom, Solomon succumbed to temptation, amassing a harem of 700 wives and 300 concubines from nations like Egypt, Moab, Ammon, Edom, and Sidon. These women brought foreign gods like Ashtoreth, Milcom, and Molech, leading Solomon into idolatry. He built altars for these gods, straying from Israel's monotheistic faith, as if the sacred covenant of his ancestors had been burned in the fire of his desires. God, angered by Solomon's disobedience, warned that the kingdom would be torn apart and given to another after his death. As Solomon stood amidst the palace, surrounded by pagan altars, the incense from these abominable idols rising like whispers of betrayal, a chilling voice echoed from the ancient darkness, the shadow that had sown since Eden. I've turned your wisdom into a fire of pride. Solomon, can you save your kingdom from ruin, or will you be the one to burn it under God's wrath, destroying all you've built? Solomon's harem was a labyrinth of beauty and power, where women from across the world brought their allure and cultures, but also whispers of foreign gods that tempted him like a siren's song. Each voice a venomous serpent hissing songs of betrayal. The palace, once resounding with praises to God, now housed altars to Ashtoreth and Molech, abominable idols Solomon's ancestors had rejected, their cold stone forms seemingly gazing at him with mocking eyes. Solomon, whose heart once burned for faith, now found himself torn between his love for his foreign wives, each a mesmerizing world unto herself, and his sacred covenant with God, like a man walking a tightrope between radiant light and abyssal darkness, where a single misstep could bring everything crashing down. The darkness, lurking in the palace's hidden corners, laughed coldly as it watched the wise king fall, knowing each altar, each prayer to a foreign god, was a stepping stone to the destruction it had sown for centuries, a plan woven from the pride and desire of men. It had seen great kingdoms crumble, from Babylon with its arrogant towers, to Babel with its ambition to touch the heavens, and now it saw Solomon as a perfect pawn, a king with unparalleled wisdom but a heart vulnerable to pride and desire, like the brightest star doomed to be swallowed by the night. Israel's people began to whisper of discontent, sensing God's wrath drawing near like an inevitable storm, ready to sweep away the light they once revered. Solomon, standing in the midst of his harem, felt a chill from the golden walls, as if God himself had turned away, his eyes filled with anguish as he realized his own downfall. Israel, once a beacon of light, now stood on the brink of division, where light and darkness clashed in a fateful battle. But could Solomon save his kingdom from God's wrath? Or would his own downfall be the fire that burns it all when the darkness completes its cruel plan, destroying everything he hoped to protect? Under the pale moonlight of Jerusalem, King Solomon, once a symbol of wisdom and glory, now lay on his deathbed, his breath shallow like the last autumn breeze, his eyes heavy with sorrow as he gazed upon the kingdom he had built, a kingdom now teetering on the brink of division, like a ship about to be swallowed by a fated storm. After a 40-year reign, Solomon died, leaving a legacy of wisdom and splendor, but also a kingdom on the verge of fracture. His son Rehoboam inherited the throne, but faced a fractured nation as adversaries like Jeroboam, anointed to rule 10 tribes, rose in rebellion. Before his death, Solomon repented, pouring his reflections into Ecclesiastes, emphasizing life's vanity and the importance of fearing God, a final warning to his people. Solomon's idolatry had sown discord, leading to the kingdom's division. But as Solomon's final gaze faded, the moonlight casting a cold farewell on his face, a chilling voice echoed from the ancient darkness the shadow that had sown since Eden. I've led you to ruin. Solomon, can this kingdom rise from its ashes? Or will my darkness forever swallow Israel's light, destroying all you hope to leave behind? The palace, once radiant with golden light and songs of praise, now stood in haunting silence, as if the walls themselves mourned the great king's downfall, the echoes of the past now mere whispers of sorrow. Rehoboam, with a rigid heart and lacking his father's wisdom, failed to hold the kingdom together, and Jeroboam, with rebellion burning in his eyes like an unquenchable fire, led 10 tribes away from Jerusalem, leaving a shattered Israel in his wake, like a beautiful painting torn into fragments. The people, who once revered Solomon, now whispered of discontent, feeling God's wrath descend like a sharp blade, slicing the kingdom he had built in two, each fragment a reminder of his fall. The darkness, lurking in hidden corners, laughed coldly as it witnessed the division, knowing each prayer to a foreign god, each altar Solomon had built, was a stepping stone to the destruction it had sown for centuries. A plan woven from human pride and desire. It had seen great kingdoms fall, from Babylon with its arrogant towers, to Babel with its ambition to touch the heavens, and now it watched Israel fracture with a cruel smile, like a predator finally catching its prey after centuries of waiting. Yet amidst the chaos, a flicker of hope emerged. Solomon's final words in Ecclesiastes, a reminder of life's vanity and the importance of faith, a small torch in the darkness, a fragile flame that refused to be extinguished. Israel, though broken, still had those who held fast to God's covenant, who might one day revive the kingdom from its ashes, like a flower blooming through ruins. But the darkness, with crimson eyes glowing like hellfire, continued to watch, awaiting its next chance to sow ruin, an unending storm of malice. Solomon's kingdom, once a beacon of light, now lay in fragments, a once glorious painting reduced to dust. But could Israel rise from the ashes of division, or would the darkness forever swallow its light, completing its cruel plan, leaving the kingdom as a mere memory? Under the pale moonlight of Jerusalem, in a hidden chamber deep within the palace where dim torches cast flickering shadows on ancient stone walls, King Solomon held a mystical ring, its glow shimmering like fallen stars from the night sky, whispering secrets that transcended time, as if the heavens themselves spoke to him. The script includes a legendary element from apocryphal texts like the Testament of Solomon, where Solomon possessed a magical ring given by Archangel Michael. This ring allowed him to control and banish demons, using them to aid in building the temple. The story is symbolic, reflecting a fascination with supernatural abilities, amplifying Solomon's wisdom and power in folklore, transforming him into a timeless legend in the eyes of his people. But as Solomon turned the ring in his hand, its light casting an ethereal glow on his face, illuminating the lines of worry etched into his features, a chilling voice echoed from the ancient darkness, the shadow that had sown since Eden. This ring is your power, Solomon, but I will use it to lead you to pride. Will this might save Israel, or open the door to its destruction, shattering all you've built? The ring, engraved with ancient symbols that pulsed with an eerie light, was more than a tool. It was a symbol of ultimate power, a celestial gift Solomon had used to command demons, forcing them to haul massive stones for the temple, as if darkness itself bowed to his will, submitting to the authority of a king chosen by the heavens. Yet each time he wielded the ring, a sense of unease rose within him, as if this power were not just a gift, but a hidden curse, an invisible thread pulling him toward the abyss of pride, where light and darkness clashed in an unrelenting battle. Israel's people whispered of the ring's legend, praising Solomon as a king not only wise, but wielding supernatural might, a man who could bend even the forces of darkness to serve the light, unaware that the darkness, with crimson eyes glowing like hellfire, watched from the palace's shadows, laughing coldly as the great king was tempted by his own gift, like an artist set to be burned by his own masterpiece. The darkness had seen the mightiest fall from Eve in Eden's garden, who bit the forbidden fruit out of pride, from the builders of Babel whose ambition to touch the heavens was punished by God, and now it saw Solomon as a perfect pawn, a king whose power could reach the heavens, but who could also be consumed by the fire of pride it sowed, like the brightest star doomed to be swallowed by the night. The palace, once a symbol of light, now seemed cloaked in an unseen shadow, as if the ring's very power was opening a door Solomon couldn't close, a gateway to forces he couldn't control. Israel, under his guidance, stood on the cusp of glory, but also on the edge of destruction. But would this ring be the key to Israel's eternal light, or the gate to its destruction when the darkness completes its cruel plan, shattering everything Solomon hoped to protect? Under the blazing sun of Jerusalem, where Solomon's glory once shone at its zenith, the ruins of his temple and palace now stand as mere fragments, like silent stones telling the tale of a bygone era of splendor. Yet his legacy echoes through time, a torch that never fades amidst the darkness of history, an eternal flame, enduring the storms of humanity. Solomon's legacy extends far beyond his era, influencing culture, religion, and thought. His books Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and the Song of Songs remain inspirational in the Bible, shaping ethics and philosophy. He symbolizes wisdom and prosperity, but his fall into idolatry serves as a lesson on pride and temptation, an indelible stain on his historical record. But as the sunlight illuminated the shattered remnants of his fractured kingdom, casting a golden glow on stones that once witnessed Israel's glory, a chilling voice echoed from the ancient darkness, the shadow that had sown since Eden. Your legacy is a light, Solomon, but the darkness I sowed remains. Will your lessons save future generations, or will my darkness continue to swallow humanity's light, destroying every hope you ignited? Solomon's teachings in Proverbs, with timeless wisdom like the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, still guide people through the centuries. A beacon in the chaotic sea of ethics and philosophy, a light that never dims despite the passage of time. But his lavish palace, once resounding with songs of praise and the laughter of glorious days, is now a memory, a reminder that even the greatest kings, even souls blessed by God, can fall when faced with temptation. Solomon's downfall from a king granted unparalleled wisdom by God to one seduced by desire and idols is a harsh lesson, a cautionary tale of pride's dangers, a fire that can consume even the brightest light, leaving only ashes and regret. The darkness, with crimson eyes glowing like hellfire, still watches from the shadows of history, laughing coldly as humanity repeats Solomon's mistakes, drawn to power and desire like moths to a flame, unable to resist its deadly allure. Itha's seen great kingdoms fall from Babylon with its arrogant towers piercing the sky, to Babel with its ambition to touch the heavens, only to be punished by God with chaos, and now it views Solomon's legacy with malice, knowing each teaching, each lesson, can be twisted by darkness, turning light into destructive blaze, a fire that could burn the world. Yet amidst the chaos, a flicker of hope endures those who continue to fear God, who learn from Solomon's errors, small torches in the darkness, ready to illuminate the path for humanity, like tiny stars that refuse to fade in a pitch-black night sky. Solomon's legacy, though radiant, is cloaked in the shadow of his fall, a tale both glorious and tragic. But can his wisdom guide humanity through the darkness, igniting a new flame of hope, or will the darkness forever triumph, swallowing the light of Israel and the world, leaving only the fragments of a lost era?